You guys hear all the time about how much real estate can make you, but what about the true cost of purchasing and operating a rental property? I'm gonna break those numbers down for you today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There are two main categories when talking about expenses: the purchase or acquisition of the property, and then the operational expenses on an ongoing basis, month to month. Let's start with the purchase. When purchasing a property, you're going to have multiple closing costs. Those costs are going to vary depending on where you live and the type of property you're buying. These numbers are based on a single family home. One of the first things you need to understand about closing costs is points. Okay, when you talk to lenders and they are giving you quotes on interest rates, those rates may or may not have points associated with them. What a point is basically a buy down on the mortgage rate. So if mortgage rates are, say, 5% and you want to get a lower rate, you can actually purchase a lower rate if you'd like. That's going to come with a cost. So if the mortgage is $200,000 and let's say it's a 5% interest rate and you want to get it a little lower, you can have the ability to buy 1 point or 2 points, which is equal to 1 or 2% of the loan amount. So let's say I want to buy this rate down to, I don't know, 4.5%. I may be able to do that for 1 or 2 points. Let's say it's 1 point. 1 point is equal to 1% of the loan amount, which is $2,000. So I would have to pay $2,000 in points to get a 4.5% rate, as opposed to not paying any points and getting a 5% rate. So these are ways that you can structure it to buy down your mortgage rate. Okay, the attorney in Connecticut, in this area, they'll cost you about $1,000 to $1,500 for a traditional residential closing. Like I said, it's going to vary depending on where you live. All right, thirdly, we have the title. The title is basically you're paying for the insurance on that, and also for them to check that the house you're buying has a clear title, meaning there's no liens, there's no debts that are hanging over that house. So when you buy the property, if they have outstanding debts from the prior owner, those debt collectors are not going to come after you to collect that debt. You want to make sure that there's a clear title, and you want to insure against any issues in the future. So that title is going to cost you usually a few grand for the insurance and the search. All right, we have an appraisal, which is basically going to cost you $500 to $1,000, and that is going to dictate how much the property is worth, and it's going to validate to the lender that your property is worth at least the amount that they're going to loan you for the property. All right, then we have the inspection, and that's usually an optional thing, but I highly recommend that you get a professional inspection on all of your properties. That's going to cost around $500, and they're going to do inspection of the systems of the home, the foundation, the roof, everything, the appliances, everything that should be in working order, they're going to check for. And if not, they'll write it up in a report, and you'll have that so you can negotiate with the seller if something's wrong. Okay. Lastly, we have prepaid taxes and insurance. So you're going to have to pay usually, a few months taxes and insurance worth ahead of time at closing. So that's going to usually be a couple of grand depending on where you live and what the taxes look like. Okay. So for example, on my first property, I paid about $10,000 in total closing costs for all of this. And that was, about a couple of years ago. So, the prices could be different now. I like to say in New York or Connecticut, it's going to cost you maybe around $10,000 to $15,000 for an investment property, and also depending on how many points you decide to go with to buy down that rate. Okay, second category is operational expenses, right? We're talking about the monthly expenses, and these are going to include PITI. Okay, you'll see this term every so often in real estate. It's PITI stands for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So most of the time when people talk about paying your mortgage, this is usually what it includes. The principal of the mortgage, the interest on it, the taxes and insurance, they're all bundled up into one payment, and that's going to be your overall mortgage payment. So for example, on my first property, my first rental property, the PITI was about $1,795. Okay, then we have water and sewer. In my first property, I had about $70 a month worth of water and sewer expenses, and this is because it had public water and sewer. So I got billed from the town every quarter, and it basically came out to $70 a month. If you have private water well or a private septic system, then your expenses are going to be different, and that's going to be dictated upon how much you use and what's required to maintain your private system. Garbage, depending on where you live, it could be private, it could be public. Where I was, it was private, and it's about $30 a month. Okay, this expense was actually passed down to the tenant. So technically, as the landlord, I wasn't paying for the garbage. And that goes the same for the landscaping, snow removal, and utilities. This depends on your preference and how you operate as a landlord. Most of the time, nowadays, the landscaping, snow removal, utilities, and garbage are kind of passed on to the tenant. But I've seen it structured in many different ways. The landscaping could cost about $100 a month in the summer to cut every 2 weeks. The snow removal could be about $50 to $100 for every time they have to plow, depending on how much is needed to be removed. And then utilities, usually that includes electric, oil, it depends on the systems of the house, but the utilities almost all the time are the tenant's responsibility. So like I said, these 4 expense items are passed down to the tenant. Maintenance costs, you need to, I would say, budget for $100 a door. What do I mean by that? If it's a single family home, it's one door. So $100 a month or $1,200 a year should be budgeted for unexpected maintenance items. If you have a duplex, then that means you need to save about $200 a month for maintenance items that you don't know will come up by the end of the year. Let me give you some quick tips that'll help you budget and allocate your expenses a little bit better. All right. I like to consider at least 1 month worth of expenses for vacancy. Okay, for turning over the property. When that tenant doesn't renew their lease, they move out, you need to freshen up the property and then find a new tenant and put one in there. That's usually going to take a month to 2 months. So I like to put aside about a month worth of expenses for turning over a property. Next tip is going to be if you need to do a lot of renovation work on that specific rental property, you need to make sure that you have good estimations of what things are going to cost you. On my first rental property, I spent about $30,000 on renovating the property, fixing windows, fixing flooring, rehabbing the bathroom. All of those things I had to estimate before purchasing the property to make sure that, number one, I had those funds available, and number two, I wasn't going to go way over budget. Okay, so that's going to be a big part of it, especially if you're buying a property that needs a lot of work. To wrap things up, always make sure you're being conservative in your numbers and projections. If you're unsure of something, always estimate and round up. Always think it's going to cost you more and it's going to take you more time than you anticipated, and that'll usually keep you safe. All right, guys, thanks for watching today's video. I hope you got something of value. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video. Have a great week. Keep grinding, and I'll see you next time.